Hi, my friends. Hi, third graders. Let's keep reading from James and the Giant Peach. So, last we ended was, James had met all of the different creatures, or now they're insects, and he really kind of likes Centipede. He's the one with all the boots and shoes, and he feels like he's kind of a rascal and funny, and we've met the spider and the ladybug and the worm. He's been saying things, but the worm's blind. He can't see anything, and the grasshopper, the old green grasshopper, seems to be the very wise one and the one that's kind of like in charge. So that brings us to chapter 13. And we ended the last one where Miss Spider was making the beds for everyone with her web. A few minutes later, Miss Spider had made the first bed. It was hanging from the ceiling, suspended by a rope of threads at either end, so that it actually looked more like a hammock than a bed. But it was a magnificent thing, and the stuff that it was made out of, the shimmery thing like silk, you could see it shine in the pale light. "I do hope you'll find it comfortable," Miss Spider said to the old green grasshopper. "I made it as soft and silky as I could possible. I spun it very special. That's a much better quality thread there than the one that I use for my own web." "Thank you so much, my dear lady," the old green grasshopper said, climbing into the hammock. "Ah, this is just what I needed. Good night, everybody. Good night." And then Miss Spider spun the next hammock, and the ladybug got in. And after that, she spun a long one for the centipede, and an even longer one for the earthworm. "And how do you like your bed?" she said to James, when it came to his turn. "Hard or soft?" "Oh, I like it soft, thank you very much," James answered. "For goodness sake, stop staring around the room and get on with my boots," said the centipede. "You and I are never going to get any sleep at this rate, and kindly line them up neatly in pairs as you take them off. Don't just throw them over your shoulder." James was working frantically on the centipede's boots now. Each one had laces and had to be untied and loosened before he could pull the boot off, and to make matters worse, all the laces were tied up in the most complicated knots that had ever been unpicked by fingernails. It was just as awful. It took about 2 hours. And by the time James had pulled off the very last boot of all and had lined them up in a row on the floor, 21 pairs altogether, the centipede was fast asleep. "Wake up, Centipede," whispered James, giving him a little dig in the stomach. "It's time for bed." "Oh, thank you, my dear child," the centipede said, opening his eyes. Then he got off the sofa and made it across the room and crawled up to his hammock. James got into his own hammock, and oh, how soft and comfortable it was compared to the hard board that his aunts always made him sleep on at home. "Lights out," said the centipede. Nothing happened. "Turn out the lights," he called, raising his voice a little bit. James was glancing around the room, wondering which of these others might he be talking to. They were all asleep. The old green grasshopper was snoring loudly enough through his nose, and the ladybug was making whistling noises as she breathed, and the earthworm was coiled up like a spring at the other end of his hammock, wheezing and blowing through his open mouth. And as for Miss Spider, she had a lovely web for herself across one corner of the room, and James could see her crouching right in the very center of it, mumbling softly in her dreams. "I said, turn out the light!" shouted the centipede angrily. "Are you talking to me?" James asked him. "Of course I'm not talking to you, you idiot," the centipede answered. "That crazy glowworm. She's gone to sleep with her light on again." So for the first time since entering the room, James glanced up at the ceiling, and there he saw the most extraordinary sight. Something that looked like a gigantic fly, but without wings. It was at least 3 feet long, was standing upside down upon its 6 legs in the middle of the ceiling, and the tail end of this creature seemed to be literally on fire. A brilliant greenish light, as bright as the brightest electric bulb, was shining out of the tail and lighting up the whole room. "Is that a glowworm?" asked James, staring at the light. "It doesn't look like any sort of worm to me." Of course it's a glowworm, the centipede answered. At least that's what she calls herself. Although actually, you're quite right. She really isn't a worm at all. Glowing worms are never worms. They're simply lady fireflies without wings. Wake up, you lazy beast! But the glowworm didn't stir, so the centipede reached out of his hammock, picked up one of his boots on the floor. Put out that wrenching light, he shouted, throwing one of his boots up to the ceiling. The glowworm slowly opened one eye and stared at the centipede. There is no need to be rude, she said. All in good time. Well, come on, shouted the centipede, or I'll put it out for you. Oh, hello, James, the glowworm said, looking down and giving James a little wave and smile. I didn't see you come in. Welcome, my dear boy, welcome, and good night. Then click, out went the light. James Henry Trotter lay there in the darkness with his eyes wide open, listening to the strange sleeping noises that the creatures were making all around him, and wondering what on earth was going to happen to him in the morning. Already he was beginning to like his new friends very much. They were not nearly as terrible as they looked. In fact, they really weren't terrible at all. They seemed extremely kind and helpful in spite of all the shouting and arguing that went on between them. Good night, old green grasshopper, he whispered. Good night, Ladybug. Good night, Miss Spider. But before he could go through them all, he had fallen fast asleep. Chapter 14. We're off, someone was shouted. We're off at last. James woke up with a jump and looked all around him. The creatures were all out of their hammocks and moving excitedly around the room. Suddenly the floor gave a great heave, and as though there was an earthquake that was taking place. Here we go, shouted the old green grasshopper, hopping up and down with excitement. Hold on tight. What's happening? Cried James, leaping out of his hammock. What's going on? The ladybug, who was obviously a very kind and gentle creature, came over and stood beside him. In case you don't know, she said, we are about to depart forever from the top of this hill that we've all been living on for so long. We're about to roll away inside this great, big, beautiful peach to the land Of what? Said James. Oh, never mind you, said the ladybug, but nothing could be worse than this desolate hilltop and those two repulsive aunts of yours. Hear, 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 they all shouted, hear, hear. You may not have noticed it, the ladybug went on, but the whole garden, even before it reaches the steep edge of the hill, happens to be on a very steep slope. And therefore, the only thing that has been stopping this peach from rolling away right from the beginning is the thick stem that's attached to the tree. Break the stem, and off we go. Watch it, cried Miss Spider, as the room gave another violent lurch. Here we go! Not quite, not quite. At this moment, continued the ladybug, our centipede, who has a pair of jaws as sharp as razors, is up there right now at the top of this peach, nibbling away at that stem. In fact, he must be nearly through it, as you can tell from the way that we're lurching about. Would you like me to take you under my wing so that you don't fall around when we start to roll? Oh, well, that's very kind of you, said James, but I think I'll be all right. Just then, the centipede stuck his grinning face through a hole in the ceiling and shouted, I've done it! We're off! We're off! Cried the others. We're off! The journey can begin, shouted the centipede. And who knows where it'll end, muttered the earthworm. If you have anything to do with it, this can only mean we'll be in trouble. Nonsense, said the ladybug. We are now about to visit the most marvelous place and see the most wonderful things. Isn't that so, Centipede? There is no knowing in what we shall see, cried the centipede. We may see a creature with 49 heads who lives in the desolate snow, and whatever he catches a cold which he dreads, he has 49 noses to blow. We may see the venomous pink-spotted scrunch who can chew up a man with one bite. He likes to eat 5 of them roasted for lunch and 18 for his supper at night. We may see a dragon and nobody knows that we won't see a unicorn there. We may see a terrible monster with toes growing out of its tufts of its hair. We may see the sweet little biggity bright hen, so playful, so kind and well bred. And such beautiful eggs, you just boil them and then they explode and they blow off your head. We may even get lost and be frozen by frost. We may die in an earthquake or tremor. Or nastier still, we may even be tossed on the horns of a furious dilemma. But who cares? Let us go from this horrible hill. Let us roll, let us bowl, let us plunge. Let's go rolling, bowling, and spinning until we're away from old Spiker and Sponge. 1 second later, slowly, oh so gently, the great giant peach started to lean forward and steal into motion. The whole room began to tilt over and all of the furniture went sliding across the floor, crashing against the far wall. So did James and the Ladybug and the old green grasshopper and Miss Spider and the earthworm, also the centipede, who had just come slithering quickly down the wall. All right, that brings us to chapter 15, and we're going to find out what Aunt Sponge and Spiker are up to next. So I hope you're having a great day, and I'll see you again next time.